Today, I'm going to share with you my travel theory of relativity, plus traveling on your own. In my opinion, it's one of the most rewarding experiences you can have. But I know solo travel can be a bit intimidating for some people, so I've got 5 quick tips to help you meet more people when you're out on the road. And another installment of our inspiring female adventurers series. Got an incredible guest for you. It's all happening today. Grab your boarding pass, hop on this train, get settled in, go ahead, get comfortable. We're going to be hanging out for a little while. Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey there, it's Jason with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show, my friend, and thank you so very much for sharing this time here with me today. This is the show to help you travel endlessly on your terms, to travel the world no matter what your situation or experience, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire. And not only that, combining your love of travel with your other interests in life, because it's not just about travel. I know you're interested in a lot of different things, so that's what this show is all about. We're going to explore different ways that you can travel the world on your terms. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. You're joining a beautiful worldwide caravan of listeners. This show's been downloaded in 195 countries and counting. It's a community-powered show, so if you have any questions you want me to answer, you just want to check in, say hi, share your story, I invite you to do so. Please send me an email to jason@zerototravel.com. Heard from a couple of our community members, Reggie from Toronto and Chris from California. They both had a similar question. And Chris also sent me a sweet little landscape picture, by the way, from a hike he was on somewhere in California, and that just had me longing for Cali. So thank you so much for sending that, Chris. Reggie is planning some solo travel around Southeast Asia later this year, but he says, quote, it's a bit scary. And he's asking if I have any tips on how to overcome that anxiety and make the leap. And Chris had a similar type of question. So I decided to create a little segment out of this for you. I'm going to share my 5 tips for meeting more people when you're out on the road. That's going to happen later in the show in a segment you'll hear after the interview. Now, let's talk about today's interview. It's part of the Inspiring Female Adventurers series, and the intention behind this series is to highlight amazing female travelers, to share their stories and their perspectives. So if you have a daughter or a woman in your life who may be inspired by this series, please feel free to share it with them. Past episodes from this series include interviews with people like Ellen Miller, the first American woman to summit Everest from both sides, Sarah Marquis, who walked from Siberia to Australia, and Polly Litovsky. I had the pleasure of taking a walk with her. She's the only woman to walk around the world, and we met up in Denver, took a walk, and I interviewed her. So I've just had some spectacular women as a part of this Inspiring Female Adventurers series. If you want to listen to some of these other shows, you can certainly dig into the archives over at Zero to Travel, or just subscribe to the podcast. You can find them all in the feed there. It's been an honor, and it's not just the epic adventures. These women are just amazing people and all so willing to share their experience with you. And today's guest is no exception. She's got a long list of accomplishments we're going to talk about, including traveling on your own, which is a theme that comes up here, how you can plan big adventures, and how she turned adventuring into a career. Travel as a way to process tragedy is also something that comes up. Plus, where you can find adventure. Here's a little clip from today's interview. I do think you could have adventures even around the corner from where you live, you know?
I mean, I've been around a lot of other people's corners.
I just love this idea that your exotic place as a traveler is just around somebody else's corner. It's just their neighborhood or just what they see every day, and maybe nothing special to them. And at the top of the show, I mentioned the travel theory of relativity. This is it. It's all relative, right? When you're a traveler, you could be wide-eyed, childlike, and you're walking around and you see something and you're just in awe of everything. And meanwhile, you could just be in a neighborhood where somebody else walks those same streets that's from the neighborhood, and that's just regular daily life for them. So they don't find anything really interesting about it. And if you flip that over, when you're home and you're just kind of walking around doing your thing, you might not be thinking much about what's around your corner. But if a traveler was coming through town, even if it seems mundane to you, they might see it with fresh eyes. Something or someone that you pass by every day might just really stand out to that person. This is what I'm talking about, the travel theory of relativity, because it's all relative to what's going on in the mind of the traveler and the mindset you bring, really. And this is why I really firmly believe you can have an adventure anywhere. That traveler's mindset it's a really special feeling. And I think that's one of the big things we crave as travelers. If we get home and we're there too long, we start wanting to get out because we want to break the routine. We want to break the monotony. We want that fresh feeling, those fresh eyes, and that openness to experience. And sometimes when you're in the daily routine, it's hard to get that back. And anyway, that was just really interesting to me. I think we've all experienced this on some level. If you've been overseas and you walk into a grocery store, for example, or a market, and they have all types of things you've never seen before, and it's just super interesting. And meanwhile, you're just in a local market, and if you walk down to the corner to your local market, you probably just rolling through, getting your stuff, not really paying attention to all the stuff that is there as much as somebody who might be coming from another country and is walking in would see it and be like, wow. And I get that in reverse when I leave the States for a while and come back. I can't believe the amount of choice and variety we have in these stores back in the States. It is seeing it with fresh eyes. It becomes overwhelming. And then you get back in to the routine. And it becomes just part of your everyday life. So yeah, there you go. The travel theory of relativity. The experience is all relative to our mindset. And if we want to go out and have an adventure, we can all do that today, wherever we are, whether you're on the road or not. I love the possibilities that come with that. Speaking of adventure, it's time to slip and slide into this interview. It was so fun. I hope you enjoy listening in on our conversation. Thanks again for being here, and I will see you on the other side. My guest today is a Swedish and Czech adventurer with a long and impressive list of expeditions under her belt. In 1996, she biked from Nepal to Sweden, which took 4 months. Then in 97, she was the first Swedish woman to summit a mountain over 8,000 meters without supplemental oxygen. Afterwards, she rode a motorcycle from India to Sweden. Going a step further in 99, she was the first Swedish and Czech woman to ever climb Mount Everest, of course, the tallest mountain on the planet. Some years later, in 2006, she embarked on a journey she dubbed the Around America adventure, which is putting it lightly because this trip involved her circumnavigating the lower 48 United States under her own power by kayak and bike. This feat took 439 days to complete and covered over 18,200 kilometers or 11,300 miles. And you won't believe what she has planned next. We're going to talk about that today and much, much more. I'm honored to have her with us today. Renata Chlumska, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Wow. What an introduction.
Well, I mean, what a set of accomplishments there. It's when you hear it back, what does that sound like to you? Does it just bring back a flood of memories?
Yes. And even I kind of get this wow feeling. Who is that person who doesn't know that?
Well, I certainly had that. I mean, I mentioned in the intro, Renata, that you are Swedish and Czech, and I know you have dual citizenship. How did you end up being a citizen of two countries?
I'm born and raised in Sweden, so therefore I got my Swedish citizenship. But both my mother and father are from the Czech Republic, so I got that citizenship through my mother and father. So I've always had two citizenships, which has turned out to be really good for several reasons.
Yeah, that's a nice thing. I mean, so when did they come over to Sweden, or when did they move there?
My father came to Sweden in 69, 70, and then my mother in 73. So she followed a few years later, and I'm born in 73. So.
And have you spent a lot of time in Czech also? I know you're primarily based in Sweden.
Yes, I've a lot of my summer holidays I spent in the Czech Republic. I mean, I still have family there, aunts and cousins. So I've always felt a very strong connection and, keeping the traditions alive. And I go and visit. I try and visit a few times each year. And I was actually in Prague just last week doing a TEDx talk, TEDx Prague. And I'm going again in 2 weeks for attending a film festival, adventure film festival. So even though I'm based in Sweden and have most of my work here, I also do a bit of things in the Czech Republic, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, but you do identify with the Czech Republic, just having spent time there and having parents from there. It sounds like you still have a connection to that country as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because it kind of almost immediately makes you a woman of the world, if you want to say that. I mean, you've traveled obviously extensively just through your adventures. I'm a little curious about what it was like in the town you grew up in. Where did you grow up in Sweden?
Well, I grew up in the southernmost parts in Sweden in a city called Malmö, which is the third largest city in Sweden. I mean, not super big, but still for Swedish measurements, quite large. It's just up from Copenhagen. So it's really, really south. It's completely flat. Mountains, and I grew up in the middle of town. But thankfully, my parents have always had a big interest in the outdoors. They've always took me on excursions and fun stuff. I mean, being very outdoorsy and camping and hiking and biking and doing all different kinds of adventures, not just in the southern parts of Sweden, but also a lot in Europe. So I'm used to traveling, and every weekend and every holiday that we could, or school vacation, we would go out somewhere and enjoying the nature and the outdoors.
So you're from a flat urban environment.
Yeah. Yes, that's. I joke about that when I have my motivational talks and speeches. It's probably because that was my surrounding, that the mountains and the outdoors and the nature was such intrigued me so much, because it wasn't what I naturally had around me. So it fascinated me, and I enjoy that challenge.
Yeah. And also, I mean, it's huge when you have parents who get you outside and take you along on those adventures. Do you remember the first time you kind of felt that feeling of adventure as a child, where you were like, oh, this is, you get that tingly feeling where you don't know what's going to happen?
I think I had an older brother who was 4 years older, so I would, tag along with him and his older friends, and there was always, there's Malmö, where I grew up. That's even if it's a city, it has a lot of green areas and a lot of parks. And I remember we would always hang out in the parks and climb trees and play hide and seek. And so just being outdoors and trying to find as much green space as possible, and having that as a playground was always fun and something that I enjoyed a lot. So it's always been there. And then there's an area outside of Malmö that's more forest. So we would take our bikes and bike there, which is, being like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, it's a pretty decent distance. But I never thought about that. It was just fun going somewhere and not really knowing where we would end up and when we would get back home.
Yeah, and that stays with you, I guess, into your adult life too. The idea of, oh, let's go out into the world and we don't know when we're going to come home, but it's just, I guess it's on a broader scale, I suppose. I've heard actually Malmo is a beautiful place. I haven't made it there yet. I mentioned earlier my wife's from Norway, and we have a friend there, so we've been meaning to head over there at some point. But I was curious, when you were in these adventures as a child and, you know, just everyday stuff, were you the person that pushed yourself a little further at that time too? Because you've done all these extreme adventures, so I guess I'm trying to see if that's something that was kind of built into the framework of who you are. You know, if you were climbing trees with friends, were you the one that always had to go the highest or, you know, bike the furthest or anything like that?
I suppose so.
Yeah.
And I've kind of always been, I mean, I am a very curious person, and that's something that has always been a strong side of me, and pretty, I don't scare easily, or, I mean, I do believe that being scared and fear is a good thing, because it's a defense mechanism that tells you, you should slow down. So I do have that, but just kind of the feeling of, what will happen and will I manage? How will I work this out? That's always been more of a feeling that I've enjoyed, the challenging part and the adventurous part and pushing myself. So yeah, I probably was the one that was, looking at my friends saying, why are you not going? Come on, let's do this.
A little bit in your DNA then, I suppose. What are the parts of, I guess, the planning process that you mentioned fear and being afraid. And I imagine when you're leading up to one of these big trips, there's a lot of anticipation that builds, and what are the parts that scare you or that kind of worry you during that process as you're leading up to something? So you make the decision to do something, you start working towards that, and then inevitably I would think that, worries and things creep in. What are some of those things for you?
I mean, it depends, of course, on what it is I'm going to do. I mean, when it comes to climbing, it's, of course, knowing as much as possible about the risks with avalanches or crevasses or the high altitude and how to manage all that, and just make sure that I'm as in good shape possible to handle that, and, not getting injured, and making the right decisions at the right moment, and actually being able to slow myself down also. I'm a person who, I easily can step on the gas. I kind of have to learn how to embrace myself also, and not always push too much, too fast. So just learning as much as possible about the elements, and feeling safe in that kind of environment, either if it's on a mountain or if it's on the bicycle or if it's, paddling the Pacific Ocean. Just learning as much as I can, and train and prepare.
You always seem to take it a little step further in some of these adventures. I mean, for example, as I mentioned in the intro, you were the first Swedish woman to summit a mountain over 8,000 meters without supplemental oxygen. But if that weren't enough, then you had to get on a motorcycle and ride it back from India to Sweden. Is that more of the travel side of you, where you're like, okay, I've done this, physical feat, but now I want to experience these cultures, and overland travel is the way to do that? I mean, where did that come into play?
I mean, for me, it is the adventure is very much the training, the preparation, the learning, standing in front of this uphill or this new thing that I don't know how to do, and learning from scratch, and surrounding myself with people who are good at what they do, and learning from them. I had no idea how to ride a motorcycle.
Oh, really?
And I guess that's what made it so much fun, that now I actually can learn something new. And I figured, what better distance to learn than going from India to Sweden? While I get back to Sweden, I should know how to ride it.
So when you first got on the motorcycle in India, that was the first time you'd ever been on a motorcycle?
That was the first time. And if somebody would, drop me off on the summit of any mountain, that would, of course, feel fantastic to see that view, to get that different perspective of things and of the world. But I would much rather have the whole trip and, lose out on that last 10 meters than the opposite, if you understand how I'm thinking. For me, going there, learning, discovering, meeting all these people, discovering these different cultures, that's so much part of what I really love. And then, of course, the physical challenge and the mental challenge. The mountain that you're referring to when I reached above 8,000 meters, that's Shishapangma in Tibet. I actually didn't reach the main summit. I reached the fourth summit. But that was, the summit is only halfway. So why get on a plane and fly home when you still have half the adventure?
How do you like overland travel on a motorcycle like that?
It is fantastic. I enjoyed the bicycle trip that I did in '96 extremely. Bicycling, it takes time. It's physical. You really have to encounter people and the environment and the cultures that you're going through. You cannot press gas and roll up the windows and be in a car and pretend that you don't see what's going outside. You have to confront whatever it is you're meeting when you're on a bicycle, and that was such a great experience. Tough and difficult in many aspects. And riding a motorcycle, I actually thought was going to be easier. You go faster in a way. It's not as physical, but also that the speed makes it difficult because you have to keep focused in a different way. And if you fall in that speed, the consequences will be so much bigger and the injuries. So bicycling was motorcycling, driving the motorcycle was a lot harder than I could ever have imagined. Plus, I didn't know how to, I'm good at mending tires on a bike. Starting to be a mechanic on a motorcycle, that just was completely different.
Yeah.
That was fun too.
You were referring to the bike trip I mentioned from Nepal to Sweden. So you prefer cycling?
I prefer cycling, although again, I would never have wanted to have the other trip undone. But I love the overland traveling, but I prefer biking. I'm sure I'm going to do other trips, maybe even in car in the future. Doing some kind of racing or rally would be fun as well. So I'm not closing any doors, but I love bicycling.
Were you bicycling on your own on those trips, or were you with the partner, or how?
No, in '96, when I bicycled from Nepal to Sweden, we had to take train part through Russia because we couldn't get the proper paperwork and visa. But I was traveling with Göran Kropp, who was a well-known Swedish mountaineer who at that time was halfway on his epic journey where he bicycled from Sweden. He started October 16th in '95, bicycled from Sweden to Nepal, summited Everest without oxygen on his third attempt. And then, I joined him on the bicycle trip back home.
Yeah. I remembered reading about him and...
Yeah, he's the crazy Swede in Krakauer's book, Thin Air.
Yeah, he was just, it was so inspiring that he had done that all under his own power. And he was, I'm not to get too personal, but you were engaged with him, right?
Yeah, we got engaged in 2001. Yeah,
and there was a tragedy.
Yeah, we had relocated to Seattle because we were planning the Around America adventure that I later called it. It was a trip that we were going to do together. But Göran was killed in a climbing accident just east of Seattle in an area called Vantage. I decided to try and fulfill the dream that we had together about the paddling around the U.S. by my own.
I'm very sorry for that, for your loss. And that puts that trip into a whole different context for me. And I mean, for you to go on and fulfill that, what was the motivation there? Was it to honor his life, or was it to process, this loss? Where was your mind at that time when you started that adventure? We're talking about the Around America adventure, where Renata did the 48 states by kayak and bike.
Sorry, I'm laughing. It's just crazy. I mean, I had no idea how big America was.
It's insane. I read that. I was like, seriously? I was like, God, I hope she gets back to me. I really want to talk to you about this.
But I think my reason for doing that was, I mean, as it often is, it was a combination of many factors. I mean, first of all, I lost Göran. Yes, I did. But I never felt like it was only me losing him. I mean, many people lost him. He was such a huge inspiration to so many people who he had met, people who had never met him, just read his book or heard about him. And he keeps on being that, thanks to the Swedish Everest solo expedition, as he called his bike ride to Everest and summiting and going back again. And I mean, he used to say that, we live once. If we have more lives, then that's a bonus, but we have one. And we kind of have to maximize it and make the most of it. We're not sure when it's going to end. And he didn't want his life to end. He wanted to live a long life. But, accidents happen. And in his case, it happened too early. And I just felt, for me to stop doing what I love, for me, that wasn't an option. I wanted to complete our mutual dream. I also wanted to do it for me. I had things that I had to discover. And I figured in a way that, I'm going to start paddling and then I'll see how far I make it. If I come halfway and I decide that this is not what I was aimed to do, then that's fine. At least I've tried. But I discovered during those months on the road and on the ocean that this is me. This is what I enjoy doing. And even if Göran physically wasn't there with me, I mean, he was very much with me on that trip.
How long after the tragedy with Göran did you leave for this trip?
Göran was killed in last September in 2002. And I wanted to start in 2003, that summer, because that was the time that we had planned that we were going to start. We had come pretty far in our planning and preparation. But in a way, fortunately, I didn't get the proper visa that I needed to the US. So I couldn't start, and I couldn't start until 2005, which was, I was not in that good shape that I thought I was in 2003. So I'm glad I got those extra years to really prepare myself, not just physically, but even more so mentally for the challenge ahead. But I love the US. It was a fantastic journey. And that was one of the things when you asked earlier about what I was scared of or my worries. It was actually about meeting people who were not, who would be, kind of wondering what I was doing and meet me with some skepticism. But it was the complete opposite. I met people every day who were so fantastic, and they thought what I was doing was amazing and inspiring, and a woman from Sweden doing this in the US. So that gave me a lot of strength and motivation to continue.
Especially having biked, across all the countries you did before, and, all the traveling you've done on the other side of the planet. I was going to ask about your impressions of America. You want to share a couple moments from the ground or things that stood out, or just your overall thoughts on what it was like to travel in the U.S.? Because I think like a lot of my listeners, people are listening from the U.S. I do have listeners from all over the world, but I feel like sometimes adventure seems like it only happens outside of your home country, whatever that is. For you, it's Sweden. For me, it's the States. But I do think you could have adventures even around the corner from where you live, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been alone around a lot of other people's corners.
That's true. Your exotic place is around somebody's corner, right?
Yeah. So, and I often, I'm good at finding those adventures in my own backyard as well. So I really do believe in that, even though I have plans of going a lot further than, even outside of our planet, but that's another story. But no, I really enjoyed the US, and I was overwhelmed by the kindness, the helpfulness. I mean, no matter where I stopped, even if I just stopped, to take a break and to have something to eat or drink or stretch my legs, the first car that would pass me, they would, hit the brakes and they would stop and they would approach me and wonder if I needed help or if I needed a ride. And then when I said no, they were like shocked. Are you doing this voluntarily? Pulling a kayak in the middle of the desert. They're like, you don't need to hitch a ride. No, I don't. But that would be cheating. So I would have to, explain myself, but in a good way. I've been adopted a few times by American families. So there was one family, a few families, but one in particular in Orange County that I remember with so much warmth. They would call me even after. First of all, I mean, I met them when I was paddling on the Pacific coast up in Northern California. And then they helped me get past Los Angeles, which was a challenge. It took me 4 days to paddle past Los Angeles. And then they actually came to Seattle to greet me when I finished my expedition. And then they called me for like a year every Sunday, because that's when they called all their kids. And just amazing people, beyond what I could ever have dreamt of. And that's how it's been and then besides that, the nature, crossing the Rockies, the desert, Rio Grande, Texas, New Mexico, Texas, the Gulf, around Florida, the Keys. And I could go on forever. Fantastic.
That's great. So they took you in and they didn't know you for very long and they ended up flying up to meet you at the end, which is...
that was than some of my friends in Sweden did.
That's so great. What a great excuse to come support a friend and also see a new place and to be there for that moment. What was that moment like? Because I've talked to some people who, have walked across America and done these different things. And I've heard for some, it's kind of almost anticlimactic because it's just so into the routine. How did it feel when you reached the end of this long journey on that particular adventure? What was the emotion?
It was in a way surreal and just, very powerful, and at the same time very strange that's the moment that I've been looking forward to for so many days, and now it's here. Just kind of unreal. I never though felt like it would be an anticlimax or just kind of, or this is this it? It was a fantastic feeling to paddle back through those great locks at Ballard Locks that I had started through 439 days earlier. Just couldn't believe it. Like, pinch me. Am I dreaming? Did I really do this? And have all friends greet me and family being there greeting me. And that day and then we had a big party in the evening. And I just remember being completely, exhausted physically and even more so mentally. But what really stayed with me was actually the next morning, because I woke up in a hotel that has the view over the Puget Sound, and I had a room with a fantastic view over the Puget Sound. And I woke up, and from my bed where I was lying, I could see the sound. And it was one of these. It was in September, so it was one of those kind of gray mornings.
Classical, like Washington, Seattle morning.
A bit of a drizzle, and I saw the ferries, going over to Bainbridge Island and everything. And I just was laying there in my bed, snugging and thinking that today I don't have to live kayak. I don't have to get in my wet, dry suit and paddle my 10 hours. I can just stay in bed this whole day. And that was just...
Is that what you did?
Yeah, no, I didn't. But I felt like the luckiest and, luckiest person in the world.
I would say at that point, you had certainly earned the right to stay in bed all day and enjoy your view. That's great. I love that. Did you know you were going to do this professionally when you started? Like, you're sort of a professional adventurer now. How did that career come about?
No, I mean, it was definitely nothing that I had envisioned when I was growing up, that this is what I want to be. I hadn't even no idea that there was a profession that you could say, adventure athlete or anything like that. Today is a bit differently, because some of the high schools and the colleges here in Sweden, they do have more outdoorsy. You can become a guide and more into that kind of a profession. But that was non-existing when I was choosing, my school. But that came about actually when I did meet Göran in 95. I was working for the Swedish Sports Federation, and we had hired him as a motivational speaker. And there in front of me stood this, a real charismatic person with a lot of energy. And he had been on K2 and Broad Peak and Shoyu and done all these fantastic expeditions, and was just planning on his the Everest trip. And that's when I kind of started thinking, wow, you could actually do this as a profession if you become, or any profession. If you become the best in what you do, you can kind of create your own profession.
I love that advice, and it's so true. And that's a theme that is, I guess, sort of weaved its way through a lot of these podcasts I've done, is you can kind of, these things happen organically, but you can sort of create your own career. A lot of people call it lifestyle design, whatever you want to call it, just kind of by doing what you love and finding a way to make a living at it, right?
Yep.
So you're kind of planning the ultimate journey next, I would say. This is something, I started looking into this and I was reading your stuff, and I was getting fired up. I was like, how can I do this, Renata? Like, I want to go with you on this next one. I don't need, and this is a trip to, well, you can share what you're up to next, I guess.
As I said, I really enjoy the next door adventures, and I really believe that you don't have to travel across the world to find them. The place where you live is very exotic if you just choose to see it that way or discover it that way. But still, there's one place that is extremely exotic far away from my neck of the woods, that it has always fascinated me, which is kind of the final frontier and the ultimate challenge. And that is, of course, space. And that has been something that I, for a long time, has been a dream that I figured, maybe you don't have to fulfill all your dreams. You can have those dreams that just feel like they're going to stay dreams, and still they can fill a purpose in life. But then in 2009, 2010, when I started hearing about the commercial space flights that are available today, I was very quick in booking my ticket, because I got the opportunity to get a pretty early seat. So I have seat number 100, or ticket number 192 with Virgin Galactic. And hopefully in a near future, I will feel weightlessness and see the world from a completely different perspective.
And that's going to be an incredible moment, knowing you've covered a lot of the globe, and then to get into outer space and look back on it. That's definitely a dream. And I'm curious. I have never talked to anybody that's gone through the process of getting considered, or I don't know how the process works for taking a flight to space on Virgin Galactic. I'm sorry. Can you give some advice for somebody that might be interested in this? And of course, there are the fees and everything, which everybody isn't going to be able to maybe afford right away. But this is an attainable thing, I think. Their objective is to get civilians into outer space? I mean, do you have to be like a professional adventurer to get on these things? How does the whole process work?
No, you don't have to be a professional adventurer. And that's the whole kind of idea, is that this is supposed to be a trip and an adventure for anybody who dares, who's willing to invest the amount of money that it costs, but who is willing to take that step. Then you don't need any particular preparation or skill. Of course, there are recommendations, but nothing extreme. It can't be compared to, like going to Everest or anything like that. And I mean, people who are not climbers, they raise money and get money and save money to do that adventure. So this is definitely possible as well if you really want to do it. Me, on the other hand, I like the part that in the preparation part. So even if I don't have to, for me, it's I see this as an expedition. So I'm preparing like, if I'm going to Mars.
So you're training as an astronaut would train?
I'm trying to train as closely as I can, being a civilian, to what an astronaut would do. So I've done the G-force testers that are available through Virgin Galactic and through Kinetic here in Linköping, actually in Sweden, not far from where I live today. So I've done them. I'm going to do the parabol flights. I've flown jets with the Swedish Air Force, and I'm, hoping to take my pilot license as well eventually. But taking flight lessons and just getting a picture of and feeling of a mental kind of map of how it's going to be and what's going to happen and how it's going to feel. Just being prepared as much as I can, because that's going to make me enjoy the ride so much more.
Right. You won't be taken off guard when you're getting the G-forces and everything that maybe somebody's experiencing for the first time. You will have experienced those things already. I was looking on their website earlier. You can apply online. It's $250,000, I think, right now. So it's not for the budget traveler necessarily. But nonetheless, you can always make it a goal and go for it. Why not? Right?
If you're not in a hurry, I mean, eventually the cost is going to come down, even if it might take a few years. But, it's something completely new that's happening. And I enjoy being when something new is happening. So, and for me, I mean, I would not be able to finance this. It's not like I have that. You don't become rich doing adventures, not in that sense. You become rich in the experience and what you see and what you learn. But for me, I took a bank loan to be able to purchase the tickets. But for me, my goal is for me, it's a way of I mean, here in Sweden, I've said that I want to become the first Swedish woman in space. So that allows me to find eventually a way to finance it as well. So otherwise, just doing it for fun, even if I wanted to, that would not be an option for me to take that financial risk that it is.
I think that's an important point, because you're looking at the big picture and you're having faith that you're going to be able to get some backing later. And I know that's not for everybody, but and
I mean, that's how I've done all my expeditions. I mean, they all have cost money. Summiting Everest or just going to Everest without any guarantee of even summiting. You don't know what the weather is going to be and how you're going to feel. And my Around America had a pretty big budget, even though, I mean, there are not any permits like you have on climbing in the Himalayas, but still being out for such a long time. A documentary was made about that trip. And then last fall, I finished 7 summits. I did the last 5 mountains.
Hey, I didn't know that. Congratulations. Yeah. Wow.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So that was, and for me, knowing that if I succeed in finishing my expeditions and in reaching the summit, then that allows me to later on be out and having my talks and motivational speeches, which is my main kind of livelihood. So for me, my expeditions are not just something that I want to do, but it's actually has become kind of an investment for me that when I get back home, I have to be good at maintaining or making the most out of.
I think you do a great job at coming up with these adventures as well. You mentioned a recent TED Talk I watched of yours that you kind of threw it out there like, hey, somebody's going to get on the moon and climb the tallest peak there. Wouldn't that be cool?
Exactly. I mean, for me, space is something completely new, just like mountain climbing was in 95. I mean, I started climbing in 95. That was when I did my first climbing course in the not far from Malmö, where it's completely flat. But we do have there were a few cliffs good enough for a beginner. And I just fell in love with the sports and surrounding myself with people who know more and who are experts. And if you have good teachers and you're a motivated, student, then that combination can get you very far. And it was the same with paddling. I mean, I was, enjoyed paddling on my spare time, but I was definitely not an expert paddler. And then I met a really good trainer in the US, Malon Hanold. She helped me train and prepare, and that's the learning curve that I enjoy so much. And it's the same now with space, surrounding myself with people who are experts, and that opens up completely new horizons and new perspectives. And what I thought was the limit just isn't the limit. Of course, somebody's going to climb the highest mountain on the moon. It's just a question of when and who.
I think it'll be you. I have a sneaking suspicion it will be you. Last question about the space flight, and then we can kind of finish up. I wanted to ask you when you think you're actually going to be going. Is there an estimated date right now on the calendar?
No, there is no date. There hasn't been a date. And they had a tragic accident last year, pretty much about a year ago. So the whole project has kind of been delayed. I mean, for me, I'm in no hurry. Space is not going anywhere.
Oh, that's true.
So that's a big advantage. And in the meantime, I can prepare even better. My kids will get older, and hopefully they will be able to join me to New Mexico, Spaceport America, where I will be flying from, see me take off and have some fun for a few hours while, and then I'm back home again. So,
so do you have kids right now or family?
I do have kids. I have 3 kids plus a bonus kid. So 4 of us.
So what do they think of all this?
What do they think? Well, they're pretty small still, but they're kind of getting a hang of that. Their mother doesn't have, this regular kind of job. It's funny. They were with me on a talk. I had a presentation just the other night here in Jönköping at the big Congress Hall, and I let them join me because it wasn't so late. And they were like, "Mother or Mom, why is everybody listening to you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you never listen."
You're like, take a page out of their book.
Yeah. So how come you get everybody's so keen on listening to what you're saying? No, but they know that I'm we do a lot of stuff together as well. I want to give them the foundation that my parents gave me when it comes to loving nature and the outdoors and feeling confident with it, and that it's a place where you can re-energize and enjoy, and it's again a fantastic playground for learning and developing new skills and learning about yourself and facing different kind of challenges. I had my older son, he's 6, he was 6 then. He joined me on climbing the highest mountain in Sweden this August. So we summited Kebnekaise together. So nothing hard, or just, a nice hike and a nice trek. And so
well, that must have been rewarding for you, the first summit with one of your kids.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So, and if we started just by pitching the tent in the backyard. So kind of taking things in small steps and being able to do this together. But yeah, I think they understand that their mother is a bit different.
Yeah. Last question. What is your best piece of advice for a budding adventurer? You know, somebody who's listening and maybe they want to plan something a little bit bigger than the normal trip, I suppose.
Oh, well, I would, my best advice would probably be to, sit down and kind of draw this or do this to-do list, what's needed, and breaking it down into those small steps and start taking them. Because I think if you have those dreams that you want to bicycle or sail or climb, it's so easy that they end up just being dreams because they feel too big. But if you really start breaking them down into small steps, eventually the first step might just be, to make that phone call or to sign up to that climbing course. And then it just feels easier. So start taking those small steps one by one, and eventually you're going to stand there doing it.
That's great. And that's another theme that runs through. I think that the cool thing about that is you could take a small step today, that can actually you can start the process today, which that's really empowering to me. Thank you so much, Renata. I mean, I loved chatting with you, and I just want to say congratulations on all your accomplishments and also what you're doing with them, because I know you're giving talks and you're sharing your story across the world, and you'll never know how much of an impact that makes, but it's inspired me today, and I know it's going to inspire the listeners here. So I just really appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for showing us what's possible.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed chatting with you. So thanks for having me.
That's great. And maybe I'll catch up with you in Sweden sometime. Who knows?
Do that. Let me know when you're in Scandinavia.
I'll be there soon. That sounds great. Take care, Renata. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Renata, thank you so much for stopping by, sharing your story, and being a part of this inspiring female adventurers series. I so appreciate it. It was really an honor to chat with you. Thank you so much. In the beginning of the show, I mentioned a couple people in this community. Got to give a shout out to them once again, Reggie and Chris. And they both had questions around solo travel. And I want to share a portion of each of their emails and then give you 5 tips to meet more people while you're on the road. And I mentioned Reggie from Toronto, Canada. He said, quote, I listened to your podcast on my commute to work, and it helped me to put into action my dream of backpacking this beautiful planet of ours on a long-term basis. I plan to fulfill my dream this coming November. Money saved, career put on hold, and major support from family and friends have sent me on my way. Congratulations, man. That is so amazing to hear. And he goes on to say, I plan to travel solo around Southeast Asia, but I must admit the idea of solo travel is a bit scary. Not having someone to lean on when times get rough can be hard, and I sometimes fail to make the first attempt to meet new people, but that's something I want to overcome. My question is, do you have any tips on how to overcome that anxiety and make the leap, and how you personally make friends while you're on the road? And Chris from California also wrote in, and thank you so much to both you guys. And by the way, if anybody has any questions or just wants to check in, jason@zerototravel.com is my email. You know I love to hear from listeners. I say it every show. I would love to hear from you. Want to get to know you all out there and what you're up to. And of course, if you have any questions, topics you want me to cover, whatever, just get in touch. I'm here. I read every email that comes through. And I want to thank you once again for listening to this show, because it really means a lot. And here is a snippet of Chris's email, Chris from California. He says, quote, I just want to know how to meet more people while traveling. Why do I always feel like I am the one that always needs to be the first to strike up a conversation with someone? Unless I am actively trying to meet someone new, it just doesn't really happen as often as I'd like. What can I do more of to make myself more approachable? End quote. Chris, Reggie, thanks for taking the time. And I want to point out that although Reggie and Chris both have concerns around solo travel, they are still going to travel. They're still going. That is key. And probably the most important point I'm going to make here in this segment of the show, because you have to go. You have to go for it. Even if you feel nervous, you feel uncomfortable, you feel scared, maybe you feel like you're going to be alone, all the more reason to do it. It's normal to feel those feelings. You got to push through it. You never want to be in the position to have to depend on other people to live out your travel dreams. And when you start rolling solo, you start having a good time, you realize you can go anywhere, anytime, and you don't have to wait for someone else to go with you. It's a total feeling of freedom. And think about it. It's hard enough to make the changes in your life you need to do to take a long trip, perhaps quitting your job or selling some stuff or renting your place out or whatever. There's all this stuff that needs to get done. Now, if you have to hope somebody else will do all of that at the same time as you, it might not work out. It might, but it may not. And even if it does work out, it's not going to work out every time in the future, because your friends, your family, they get busy, they get jobs, they get families, their priorities change, as do all of ours. So if your priority is to travel, then the best gift you can give yourself, I believe, is the gift of solo travel, because you can be your own good time and you can take that anywhere you go. It's amazing. And even when you're home, you can take that everywhere you go at home. You don't have to wait for somebody to go out to dinner with, to go to the movies with, or whatever. Like, you get used to hanging with yourself. It just opens up a whole new world of everything. And again, I'm sharing my experience and what has helped me, and through conversations with a lot of other travelers, I've come to learn that universally it seems like people highly value their time solo traveling for a lot of these reasons, because it's not just about the trip, it's also about what you take home from the trip and how it helps to develop you as a person. And again, just my experience, not trying to tell you what to do, but if you're one of those on the fence around solo traveling, I highly, highly encourage you to go. Now, here are 5 personality-driven tips to help you meet more people on the road. I'm not going to talk about some of the obvious things, like staying in a hostel is something that will really help you meet a lot of people, for example, because if you're in a hotel, you're just going back to your room by yourself, whereas a hostel has like a common room and there's more social type of stuff going on. That might be one example of a more actionable tip, but I'm not going to talk about that type of stuff. I'm talking about more of the personality type of stuff, because I think that's what Reggie and Chris were getting at here. You know, they were asking about maybe being more approachable or not having to be the first one to approach somebody. And I would say just to that, before I get into tip number 1, yeah, that's a pipe dream. I think you can't expect that you're going to sit back and people are just going to come up to you and you're not going to have to do anything. You're going to have to put yourself out there. So the idea that you can just hang and there's some way you can give off this aura where people are magically going to invite you along, it will happen, certainly, but it's not going to happen a lot. You have to put yourself out there, and that's important because that mindset makes all the difference in the world. The idea of putting yourself out there, you'd be like, hey, I'm going to go out with the intention of maybe meeting somebody today, you know, meeting some other travelers or some locals, just being open to it. And there's a line here, I think, because you don't want to set yourself up to be disappointed either, because it's not always going to work out when you're traveling solo. You might want to spend a day with somebody because you're feeling lonely, but it might not happen. So you can't stake the quality of your day on if you meet somebody or not. You got to enjoy the day regardless. But if you want to meet more people, the first tip here is to listen. Listen. Ask questions, then listen like a maniac, because people love to share. And if you're an awesome listener, you won't believe how much people will share, how much they will feel connected with you. And if you just keep asking them questions and listening and not trying to interject or offer your opinion on too many things, don't have a dialogue, but just practice listening more than talking. And I think that is the number one thing. That's why I put it at number one, because when you become a good listener and you're genuinely curious about people, they will be happy to share. And think about how you feel when somebody's really listening to you, when you get the sense that they're really, really deeply listening to you and trying to relate to you and get to know you. It's a really good feeling. It's a true connection. And the more you can reciprocate that and be a good listener, asking a lot of questions and just generally spending more time being curious about other people than concerned with letting them know about you, if that makes sense. It's not like you shouldn't let them know about who you are, but you can kind of hang back and wait for them to ask questions and let them get to know you on their time. But at first, just listen, ask a lot of questions, get to know people, and eventually they will turn it around. They will ask you questions. And I think it's the best way to meet people is to just be a good listener and to actually genuinely be curious about them as individuals. The second tip is to be open. Of course, I've said this before, smiling, eye contact, general friendliness. That's really helped me. And I think it projects this energy that your guard is down. You know, when you're smiling, when you're making eye contact, when you give off the aura of being open to meeting other people, it's something that people pick up on. I can't explain this. I don't know if it's a body language thing, if it's a subconscious thing, if it's a sixth sense, whatever. I don't know what it is, but when you come with an open energy and that intention is to meet other people and you really kind of put that out there, you're like, hey, I'm open to anything today. I'm open to meeting anybody, getting to know people, hanging out. Whatever that is, whatever that energy is for you, when you get into that mindset, you give it off. And it's a powerful way to put yourself out there without having to even speak or say anything. And if you think about this in life, think about dating, for example, you can kind of pick up on who's open to meeting somebody. Say you're at a bar, or I don't know, you're out in a public setting and you're trying to maybe meet somebody or get somebody's number, or if you're married or whatever, think back to your previous life or whatever. But you can kind of pick up on who's open, you know, even just say you're hanging at a coffee shop and you're sitting next to somebody. If somebody's hunched over their coffee and they're, you know, reading a book and they just really have a face or this energy where they don't want to be bothered, you can pick up on that, you know? It's not just the body language, it's the energy they're giving off. And that's opposed to maybe somebody else who is kind of sitting back and they just look like, hey, they'd be ready to chat anybody up. You just pick up on that. I don't know why. So being open is totally key. The third tip I want to say is a little more practical, I guess. Just hang around. Hang around. Don't expect it to happen right away. For example, if you are at a hostel, go down to the common room, the common area for breakfast. Go early and just hang out there. You know, don't come the last 20 minutes of breakfast. If breakfast lasts for 3 hours and you're coming the last 20 minutes, you might not meet anybody. But if you come early and you hang out there for a couple hours, maybe you linger over your coffee, maybe you're reading a book, you can chat some people up here and there. Don't be afraid to invite somebody along on whatever it is you had planned that day, or even just asking if they want company, if that seems appropriate. Just keep it casual and cool. You know, if you just hang out, kind of chat people up here and there. I think there are a lot of commonalities that you can find. And this is less meeting locals and more meeting other travelers here that we're talking about. I'll talk about meeting locals in a second. But hanging around in a place like that, a hostel or something like that, I think it's easy to meet people because you have so much in common. It's not hard to find a common ground, right? You're both traveling. It's not like you walk into a bar and you don't know anybody's situation, what anybody's doing, who they are, anything about them. When you walk into like a hostel, you kind of know, all right, most of the people there, they're really into travel. They're from another country and they're in a country that they've never been to. They're doing a lot of the same things. You have all these things in common right away, and you know you have them in common. So it's really not hard to strike up a conversation. And don't be afraid, you know, even though the typical questions get asked all the time, like Where are you from? What have you been doing while you're here? How long have you been traveling? All these questions get asked over and over and over again. And some people get tired of those questions. Personally, I don't. I find it fascinating anytime I cross paths with another traveler who wants to share a little bit. I love to hear what they've been up to, where they've been, how they're traveling, how long they're traveling, what got them started traveling. Obviously, you know this about me. I host a podcast all about this. So it's the same idea, just, again, being curious and asking. But it's so much easier to meet other travelers because you have all of these things in common already. But sometimes it's a timing thing. So if you hang around just a little bit longer at these types of places, you can have a better chance to meet people. Or some of the other tips I've given in other shows. For example, you can be an independent traveler, but do these group tours every now and again. So you could sign up for a food tour or a walking tour of the city or whatever. And that gives you a great chance to meet people. So don't be afraid to do those things. Fourth tip here, share at any cost. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're out in town and say you find this kick-ass pastry shop and they're just the best pastries, they're so good, buy some extra ones, Don't buy one for yourself, buy 6 or a dozen and take them back to wherever you're staying or take them somewhere and share with people, just share with them. I've had people share food with me on the train, at the hostel. Everywhere. If you want to share food or, buy a couple extra beers, if you like beer, and share those with people, who cares if it costs a little extra money? You're going to make friends. You offer people a drink or some food or whatever you have. Big deal. It could cost some extra money, but who doesn't want to share in some delicious food or drink? You're going to have these things to give away, and it's just a nice thing to do. And even if you don't get a friendship out of it, or even if it doesn't turn into a big hangout session or whatever, it's still a cool thing to do. You find an awesome pastry, hook some people up with a pastry. That's all good. Who doesn't love to get hooked up? So that's always a fun thing to do. Share at any cost. And it doesn't have to cost you a lot of extra money. Just spend a couple extra bucks, get a little bit of extra food and share it, or whatever it is. So that's a great tip, I think. And lastly, probably more important than the first tip on listening, is to just learn to love being on your own, because either way you win. Either way you win. If you don't care too much, then that seems to be when things happen, first of all. And second of all, even if you don't meet anybody, so what? Either way you win. You get to spend the day with yourself doing things. And the more you spend time alone traveling, the more you get used to that. And it doesn't happen right away. I get that. And you're going to have off days. And that's just all part of the experience. I have a couple other podcasts you might want to listen to around this topic. 2-part podcast, 16 ways to meet locals. So you can search for that if you want to hear that. And another podcast, how to crush your pre-trip anxiety. And there's some things you can do if you're just feeling a little anxious about your trip before you go. So there you go. Those are some 5 quick tips on solo travel. As you can see, I'm a huge fan. Solo travel. Love it. Let me know what you think. Jason@zerototravel.com. If you want to share your tips or just say hello, please get in touch. Now I'm going to share a quote with you to end this show from another inspiring female adventurer. This quote is from Amelia Earhart. Quote, "The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. The fears are paper tigers. You can do anything you decide to do. You can act to change and control your life. And the procedure, the process, is its own reward." Have a great day. I'll see you next time. Take care.
This podcast has been brought to you by zerototravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.